I wish I would have thought through in 2019 about my communication being the most important part of the sustainability program, because it really is. Asking and requiring people to do more for their job and more record keeping never makes you anyone's best friend. So I sort of joke sometimes sustainability feels like pushing a snowball uphill in the desert a lot. There are a lot of things to think through when you're communicating and being able to say more than, well, we're being asked to do this, and that it feels comfortable and welcoming and not like a pain in the butt all the time.
Sustainability is a word that often means different things to different people. And it's no secret that there's increased consumer preference and demand for food being produced from sustainable sources. But what exactly does that mean? Who determines and defines what that is? And how does a company, let alone an individual farmer, establish a system for accurately tracking, measuring, and proving their efforts are truly making a difference? Today, we talk with a director of sustainability for a milling company in Michigan who tells us communication and science is at the heart of it all. That's all ahead on today's episode of Shooting the Shift. Hello and welcome to Shooting the Shift, a venture here at Shiftology Communication, where our team of communication professionals take time to reflect, share, and provide insights into what we do each and every day to help our clients reach more, convince more, and win more. I'm Dan Toland, Director of Virtual Experiences here at Shiftology, and we're happy you're joining us for today's episode titled, We're Sustainable, and we're gonna improve it. All right, well today we're joined by Lisa Woodke, Sustainability Director at Star of the West Milling Company. Lisa, welcome. And we're also joined by, again, our Agriculture Account Manager, Cassie Jo Aaron. Cassie Jo, welcome back to the show. We're happy to have you both here today to talk about sustainability. So before we get into this, Lisa, can you just quickly introduce who you are and what you do?
Yes, thank you very much. So as you mentioned, Lisa Woodke, work at Star of the West Milling Company. I've been with Star of the West since 2019, brought on as their first sustainability director. And what that looks like is working between our food companies and our farmers, figuring out what sustainability is for each of those different customers.
When we talk about sustainability, it means a lot of different things to a lot of people. Dictionary.com, I looked this up beforehand, actually defines sustainability in two ways. It's the ability to be sustained, supported, upheld, or confirmed, and the quality of not being harmful to the environment or depleting natural resources, and thereby supporting ecological balance. How do you define it, though?
Yes, it's a really great question, and probably how I define it and how Star of the West defines it are slightly different. But we like to make sure that there's a three-legged approach or a three-legged stool. So we always want to have people in there, planet, and profit. And so when we're looking at all three of those, then we feel like we can make sustainable decisions. But the little caveat that I personally like to add in is quote from Maya Angelou: do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better, because we're meeting each of these farmers at a different level in their sustainability journey. They have different definitions of what that means to them on their farm. And so I think having that little bit of a caveat helps.
I like that.
So you're a sustainability director. So we have this thing that's widely defined. People see it so many different ways. How the heck do you direct sustainability? I mean, is this a new position in ag organizations, and why is it so important to Star of the West?
So I think it's not a new position in large companies, especially those that are publicly traded. We are not a publicly traded company, but we work so closely with food companies and receive so many requests about what our farmers are doing and what is happening to the products that we are selling to them, that we felt the need to implement that. One additional piece that Star of the West has that other companies don't is, in addition to selling to our food customers, we also work directly with farmers and sell to the farmers. So we have agronomy locations in the state of Michigan, in addition to our processing and milling. So that makes us unique in that sense, and has been somewhat easier to obtain and work with grower data.
Cassie Jo, I know you have a lot to contribute to this conversation because you've dealt with this. You've actually done some sustainability reporting yourself. Can you give a little bit of your background as well and how this ties all together?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the agriculture account manager, so I get to talk about these topics pretty regularly here at Shiftology. And in my previous career at Cooper Farms, I was the corporate communication manager and was that one that really had a lot of the conversations, and we started our first sustainability report. And I remember thinking, okay, we're doing all these great things, but we're not talking about them. How do we talk about those? And how do I get the numbers to show that go with all these great things? Because it's not enough to say we care and we are trying to do our best. We have to give numbers to support that. But somebody has to find those numbers and track them. Somebody has to be in charge of all of that. And it takes, honestly, a village. It's one of those situations where it takes a variety of people to work together and all be heading in that same direction. I just remember thinking, how do I do this and not make everybody mad because I'm giving them more work? I don't want to make everyone angry at me, but I know this is the right thing. And I know this is what the customers want and what end consumers are ultimately looking for, because that's really what's driving it. Those end consumers want to know that they're buying from a company that cares. And part of that is you can read a lot of research books out there about younger generations. Millennials like myself and younger especially are the ones that want to work with companies and buy from companies that they agree with their values, where they align somewhere. So when companies can do that, they will. And that goes back all the way to agriculture and how do those farms then meet that need? So I've gotten to see a lot of that. And then obviously now the agency side of things, I get to see it and work with it every day with our customers and really want to tell those stories, because agriculture in general, farmers and food companies do the right things and they truly care, but they're not always talking about it and they're not always tracking it. And so how do you do all those pieces? It's not near as easy as any one person would think. I mean, when you think about that, it's not one thing. How do you explain that to people?
Yeah, it's definitely not one thing and it's not one department and there's not one easy silver bullet. And you picked up on tracking. I think tracking is the number one thing that should happen on a farm in this journey. And as you mentioned, if you're not tracking it, you can't measure against it. And so when I talk with farmers, no matter what they're doing on their farm, start tracking those things. And then when you make changes, we can see those changes. And then, like you mentioned, Cassie Jo, you can account for those changes. And I do know that in addition to tracking, measuring is something that's been hard to look at outside of greenhouse gas measurements. There's not a system or a way across the state of Michigan or across the US to measure sustainability. I know how much I weigh in pounds, and if I'm in another country, maybe I measure that in kilograms, but in sustainability, there's no way to say you're this letter grade or number score or anything. And I think that has been the most disappointing or difficult to explain to growers, and then disappointing in general because there's not one measuring tool for all.
So how does this work begin? Like, how long ago did you start implementing this? How'd you go about it in developing a system that, like you said, has no set ranking or number system? How do you go
Right.
about this?
Star of the West had previously worked with Kellogg for a long time, and we supply soft white wheat to their cereal into the cereal industry. But to Kellogg specifically, we had started tracking on-farm grower data in 2015. So we had growers tracking each and every pass on their fields for the wheat that they brought to us, the farmers that chose to work with us in this program. And so we started there. And by 2019, when I came on board, there was many more requests from many different companies. And so what we were able to do is say, we've used the system for a while. We know the pros and cons of it. And then we started looking for different systems to see what might be a better option. We, for a couple of years, looked at having our agronomists input the data. Like, was that easier? Obviously easier for the farmer. But what we found was agronomists probably have enough to do already, and adding tracking of field level data wasn't ideal. So now we're back to farmer-led data input, and we are working with a system out of Sweden. They work with a lot of large customers around the world, and so we'll just see. I often say that working in sustainability is sort of like throwing spaghetti on the wall, like what sticks, what works, what doesn't. And the number of times you have to say, we tried it and it didn't work, you really have to be open to knowing that you're going to fail a number of times. And truly, there maybe isn't something perfect out there, but you've got to move forward with something.
What kind of data you are tracking? You say every pass of the field. What type of things are you looking at?
So initially, we did track every pass, what herbicide, what insecticide, what fertilizer, what was the fertilizer analysis, et cetera, what was the date you planted, what was the hybrid. But we've come to recognize that that level of data, number one, is obviously hard to manage. But then in addition, if we're looking at greenhouse gas accounting, which again is generally the thing that we're measuring against at this point, the biggest mover and shaker in that category is fertilizer. So now we focus on, let's get the fertilizer applications right. Let's get the plant dates right. Let's get the cover crops, what was used, when it was terminated, how it was terminated. So we, in addition, irrigation. So we've kind of boiled it down to 6 really big questions. And so we're able to really hone in on some pretty important data with very few questions now that we're utilizing the improvement system.
And Cassie, Joe, you've done this before, like you mentioned at your previous employer as well, tracking a bunch of other type of data. What are the other things that you can track for sustainability purposes?
I feel like sustainability is so nuanced. And I know there we ended up sort of expanding it to more of a corporate responsibility impact type of perspective because it all ties together when they are a farm to table company, which you're very similar. They're in the animal industry, but it's similar concept. There's so many pieces that tie together, and how do you separate those elements? So we made a point to talk about the environmental, like how many trees are planted, how many setback areas and wooded acres, what's tillable, what's not tillable, just sort of talking through all of those things, which some of those are very concrete numbers that are easy to talk through and easy to share. But then I know animal care was always a big one when it came to sustainability. And it's not environmental, but it is at the same time because what you feed the animal affects what comes out the other end of the animal. And that affects the fertilizer, and how that's used affects the land in general. And so it's this big connected piece that if you're feeding the animals properly, the manure that you get out of them is really good and high quality. It is good for fertilizer for grain farmers around the area or the person that is helping to farm those animals. You know, there's contract growers that work with them and telling the story of family farmers, which I know, Lisa, you have a very similar thing, that you have the family farmers and you have all these great stories to tell.
We do have great stories to tell, and agriculture seems to be the worst industry to tell its own story. So we partnered with Shiftology to help highlight different growers each year. So last year we were able to do 4 growers, and then this year we will also highlight 4 growers. So the growers talk about what they're doing on their farm. They highlight sustainability practices that they've implemented or that they've had on the farm for a number of years. And so what this helps do is, number one, generally farms that don't sell direct to consumer don't focus on this kind of information sharing. And number two, we can take these videos and share with our food companies and say, these are some of the growers we work with, and working with us, we can have access to doing more things like this or talking with these growers, et cetera. The other thing, Cassie Joe, that I was thinking about when you were talking about the different nuances, so we haven't at all touched on the people side of sustainability. So the video work helped us to do that, showcase these farmers are people and their families and their kids and their spouses, et cetera. But in addition, when we work with food companies, they seem to either ask one of 2 questions. It's either environmental sustainability or it's social sustainability. Some companies don't focus on soil health and cover crops, et cetera. They focus on how are we treating our employees and what are the things that we're doing. So in that vein, we have a couple different things that we do. We have an internship program, which lots of people do, but one part of our program is called Let's Eat, or Let's Experience Agriculture Together, where the students get to take 5 or 6 different field trips across the summer across the state of Michigan, because Michigan, being the second most diverse agriculture state in the nation, first with access to water, we like to showcase there's wineries, there's asparagus, there's potatoes, there's just so many different things. And if they don't stay with us, we'd like them to stay in agriculture. So that's one side of responsibility or social sustainability that we focus on. But on farm, I tell our growers, pick something, like what's your favorite thing? And if it's focusing on Habitat for Humanity, or if it's a food bank in the area, whatever you choose in sustainability is not wrong. So pick something that means a lot to you and then move forward with that.
What would you say, if you had to boil it down, like what are the key aspects to a good sustainability program and getting through that process to build a good program or system?
I wish I would have thought through in 2019 what we've talked about here about my communication being the most important part of the sustainability program, because it really is. Asking and requiring people to do more for their job and more record keeping never makes you anyone's best friend in the company. So I sort of joke sometimes between two things. Number one, sustainability feels like pushing a snowball uphill in the desert a lot. And I heard that at a sustainability conference from a gentleman in a large food company. So I felt really vindicated that he felt the same way. And then also, sometimes I joke that I don't know which department is going to be the most mad at me on what day. So it really isn't as bad as that, but there are a lot of things to think through. And when you're communicating the why and being able to say more than we're being asked to do this. So how do you make it applicable to all and that it feels comfortable and welcoming and not like a pain in the butt all the time?
Yeah, like what results have you seen from that? What can you turn around and then show and say, this is why we're
It's a really good question. It's very hard to come up with one piece that says like, oh, this is the trophy we received for doing these things. What we focus on is our customer relationship, both with our food customers and our farmer customers, focusing on helping those food customers achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve and keep selling the products that they need and want to sell, because without them being able to sell on the shelf, we can't supply the wheat or the dry beans or the food grade soybeans to them. So I think maintaining our customer relationships, being the supplier of choice, and knowing that they can come to us and ask questions. In fact, we had a sit down the other day here at our Frankenmuth corporate office with a food customer who's just dipping their toe into trying to figure out how they're going to do reporting and what can they do. And so we sat down and I said, we did these things, these did not work. We tried these things, they worked medium good. And so to try to help them through making, I don't want to say better choices, because you have to figure out what's happening in each individual company. And I guess that's another hard part of sustainability. Every farm field is different. Every farmer is different, and every food company has a different focus. So you've got a lot of different coming together.
and how do you go about communicating that then at the end once you've had the data to show that? What method are you
Similar
using?
to Cassie Joe, we started our first sustainability report after I arrived here, and we patterned it after another Michigan company. And from there, we've grown. I'm happy to say this year's looks a lot better than our first year. And I think that's part of sustainability too. You're not going to start out perfect. You just need to start and then make that your baseline, whatever that looks like, starting and moving forward and tracking the progress. But yes, we have a sustainability report, should be on our website, and it looks beautiful, has actual information in it. And so it's been great in that way. We can share that with our food customers. We can share that with our growers. The other thing we like to communicate that I hadn't thought about is sometimes our growers feel very targeted. I'm the only one that's being required to do these things. So hearing that and acknowledging it is one thing, but then also we chose to have some additional action that we could showcase that we are doing things as well. So we had our whole company carbon footprint third party verified. We spent money showing what Star of the West is doing and where our baseline is so that we can make improvements going forward. So it's not just our farmer growers doing all the heavy lifting. And that's the other part. We try really hard to make the data tracking as easy as possible.
How do you get the farmers to participate? How do you incentivize them to do that? Because it's a lot of extra work. My husband's a grain farmer. I understand that they have a million plates they're spinning all the time. How do you give them that incentive and that encouragement to want to track all the information for you and the end customer, and also see the value in everything that they're doing? Like, how do you build that relationship with them?
So we try to go about it in a couple different ways. Number one, tracking the information is never going to be harmful to them for future. So I try to bring up carbon markets right now. So generally in a carbon market, you have to have this year's data and sometimes 3 years prior or 5 years prior. So when I speak with growers, I'll say, if you start tracking now, carbon markets, I can't explain what they might or might not do, but I do know a number of companies have 2030 goals, and it's 2025. Between now and then is 5 years. So the opportunity to be involved in a carbon program is probably pretty high. And so start tracking. Number two, we also try to work on other programs outside of Star of the West and our food company programs. So we try to help them, the data that they already have or the data that we could use, input that into other programs to help them find or access funding. And then number three, I sort of play the chicken egg card. Like, if you can provide us data, I can take data to food companies and say, this is what we have. What is that worth to you? So it's very hard to tell food companies, I have access to data, and they want to, what does it look like and how much and how many acres and what crops. And so I've tried to explain, like, with data, I can make a sales pitch to food companies, but without data, it's very hard to. And so I think that's the way we've tried to approach it, to help farmers as much as we can in all the ways that we can, and then hope that our relationship is strong enough that they'll do some extra tracking.
When it comes to what the consumer wants, what's changed? And how do you envision the future of sustainable agriculture changing over time?
I have a lot of different thoughts on this, and they hopefully will all coalesce into something that makes sense at the end. So, in addition to our conventional agriculture, we also have an organic division. And so I focus on sustainability in both conventional and organic systems. So, when we're looking at what do consumers want, I think they want a number of different things without an understanding of what those things might actually mean. And it's very hard to walk the line between organic and conventional. And one of those is better than the other, which I try to say, not one is not better. They are different in how they are growing. There are things on the farm. All that being said, I'm not sure that we need another logo like a non-GMO verified butterfly or an organic certification. And I feel really strongly that the level of certification that's involved in organic and the amount of money that's paid to maintain that certification definitely don't need to be heading down that path for sustainable or regen ag, in my opinion. There's a lot of consumers out there that do not need to be paying additional money to put food on the table. However, when farmers make choices that improve soil health, that costs money as well. And so there's this sweet spot of affordable food that has these additional benefits. I do not know where that sweet spot is. I wish I did. And that's partly what we work through each and every day, is figuring out what that looks like.
When you look at all of that, what role does communication play in that?
I mentioned it earlier, but meeting the farmers where they are. So not communicating, hey, farmer, you've got things that you need to do differently, but hey, let's talk about what your farm looks like. Let's talk about your diversity in crop rotation. Let's talk about what you're doing for tillage. So talking through those things and then making suggestions that might be beneficial, or introducing them to growers that are doing things that might be beneficial for their farm. And from there, it's turning around and talking and communicating to the food companies, saying, these are the things our farmers are doing. And I know you're not interested in hearing that herbicides and pesticides are something that is being used, but they are, and this is why. And these are the ones that are being used, and this is why they're being used. I love to share farming with people that aren't involved in farming. Being able to share why they do what they do is great, and helping. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Just saying, this is what they do and this is why they do it. This is a combine and this is a tractor, and wheat is planted in September and October in Michigan and harvested in July. Like, some of the things that you think we don't have to go all the way back to that level, you actually do need to communicate that, or you need to figure out that where they are at, and so you can start communicating properly. So I think that's really the biggest piece, figuring out where they're at and then communicating from that point forward nicely, politely, and not too scientifically, but with science.
That's a good tie-in. That's how our boss Melanie likes to operate too.
Yes.
Our communication is rooted in science, and we help communicate science in a scientific way that makes sense for people. So
I thought you might like that.
Getting that plug in there. Yeah. Go ahead, Cassie. Joe, you had a question.
I was going to ask, is there one story from all your time in this role that really just helps you to remember the true impact of what you're doing, or the value of what you're doing in the end?
One of my favorite stories from my time working sustainability is when people share with me, and it's usually on the slide, like, we attended this meeting, and then when we got home, my spouse did this, or my spouse didn't do that, or we tried no-till for the first time. So it's always like a secret undercover, we're trying this for the first time. There was finally a way to implement it on our farm, and we took the leap and we did it. Because I often hear, well, we tried that 10 years ago, didn't work. So hearing that we tried it again, or watching what's happening, we're listening, we know that it's probably time to try it again. So I love to see that. And I especially love it in an age group that you wouldn't expect it. So I would expect stereotypically that the younger generation would try the new things. And it's so heartwarming when it's the older generation leading.
That's wonderful. That has to just feel good too, that you're doing all this work and people are seeing the value in what you're doing.
Yes.
So as we start to wrap up here, just some final thoughts. Like, what advice would you give to someone looking to start or grow their company's own sustainability program?
Number one is you need to find someone that is willing to, as I said earlier, be wrong a lot of the time and just keep going. So you need to find someone that can roll with the punches and keep going. So that means a fairly optimistic attitude as well, because the space is full of a lot of gray. We had an employee work with us on our team and then went back to doing their old job because there was just too much, like there wasn't enough black and white. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. And I say, well, just go ahead and say it, and then we'll clean it up if it's wrong. And then an accounting background or some love of Excel spreadsheets would be really great. And if it's not you that's leading the team, someone on your team, because if you get into actual greenhouse gas accounting and third-party verification, there is such a data lift. It's unbelievable. I have said jokingly that I don't know if I'd have taken the job if I knew how much I was going to have to be an accountant. And so I love working on farm. I love working with our food companies, but making all those numbers coalesce is just not a love that I have found yet. So I think that would be my suggestions.
I don't think you're alone in that. I have found over my years and years of being an agriculture communicator that the communication people are communication people for a reason. A lot of it's because we don't math very well. I mean, we
I
can
love it.
wordsmith, but number smithing is not my specialty at all. So I get it. I get that completely. But there's a ton of data to pour through because Cassie Jo, I've seen the work you've done on a lot of these things. To prove that you're doing something better, you got to have the stats to back it up. So how can listeners learn more about Star of the West and your sustainability efforts?
Yes. So www.starofthewest.com is a really great place to start. Like I mentioned, our 2024 sustainability report is there. And we also are on LinkedIn and Facebook, so you can find some fun things there as well. I appreciate the opportunity to share, and I am happy to connect with anyone. It is a hard space to just start, but as I mentioned, just start and you'll get small incremental growth, and that'll be the way forward.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
You know, there's so much to consider and think through when it comes to reporting and communicating sustainability efforts, but sometimes the best way to get started is to simply look at what others are doing. Feel free to check out the show notes here wherever you're watching or listening to this episode, and we'll have links to Star of the West Sustainability Report and the Cooper Farm Sustainability Report that were mentioned in this episode. And you can always feel free to check us out at shift-ology.com, where you can learn more about the services we provide and contact us for a free 30-minute discovery meeting. On behalf of the entire gang here at Shiftology Communication, I'm Dan Tolan saying thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Shooting the Shift.